Bullet jump and replicating factory loads, this week on Mail Call Mondays. Mail Call Mondays is brought to you by Modular Driven Technologies. If you need a chassis system for your precision rifle, check out mdttac.com. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and this Monday we've got one question from one of our Patreon viewers because it is a long one. So we're going to read through it here, and please stick with me, and then we're going to cover some of the different points of this question. And our first question comes from Steven, and Steven asks, I have a question on bullet jump. I have a Savage 110 BA chambered in .338 Lapua. If I load to magazine length, it still has an insane bullet jump. The overall length to the lands is 3.826 inches, and I've been loading to 3.267 per the Hornady manual. In my magazine, overall length of 3.772, so I would have to load slightly shorter than that so I don't have magazine issues. When I originally got the rifle, I shot a box of Hornady 285 grain BTHP match ammo with fantastic accuracy in the 1/2 to 5/8 MOA range. But I didn't verify that at distance because the range I had access to at the time only had 100 yards. I've been trying to duplicate that load via information that I found on the internet, but it seems to be extraordinarily hot using 94 grains of Retumbo with the 285 grain ELD match projectile, and also using Hornady brass. But I'm using Lapua brass because of the Hornady brass seems to stick in my chamber. I played with the overall length using Berger 250 grain hybrid OTM tactical projectiles with no success. I ended up buying about 1,000 projectiles because I got a really good deal on them, but they don't seem to shoot well out of my rifle, so then I switched to trying to make the ammo that shot really good in the first place, the Hornady 285 grain BTHP. I started a ladder test to build up to the 94 grains of Retumbo that supposedly matched the Hornady factory ammo, but only got halfway through before I noticed some signs of overpressure. This information came from Dan Newberry's website, which in my opinion is a reliable source, so I don't understand why I'm getting pressure signs at 91 grains. Now, given it's just ejector marks at this point, I didn't have time to finish the ladder test or try the next run to see how much worse those pressure signs were. Anyways, a very long story short, I'm starting to wonder if it's the barrel having such a long jump to the lands. I would like to have something I can load from magazine that can sit 2/100ths off the lands. Do you think I should quit wasting my time doing a load development and just replace the barrel? If you think the replacement barrel is a good idea, what manufacturers do you think I should look at? By the way, thanks for all the information that you get out there to help us shooters improve at what we love to do. Stephen, I think there are a couple of issues with the way that you're going about this. First of all, the fact that the rifle shot the factory Hornady loads fairly accurately, albeit only at 100 yards, that tells me that there's probably not really an issue with the rifle barrel or the chamber itself. Now, it's typical for factory rifles to have long throats and a pretty decent jump to the lands, and part of that reason I think is for pressure issues. That gives you the widest variety of ammunitions without running into a pressure spike. If they cut that throat really short, then some bullets would engage the lands, some bullets would still jump, and it would really be dependent upon bullet design. And I think it would be difficult for a rifle manufacturer to produce a rifle and say you can only shoot this bullet, and this bullet with this rifle. That would turn a lot of prospective customers off. So cutting the throat long gives them the best ability. So what you have to do then is you have to look for projectiles that like that jump so you can still load to magazine length and the bullets will jump and engage the rifling consistently each and every time. Now, the more severe the taper at the ogive of the bullet, the less they tend to tolerate that jump, the more they want to be close to the lands and grooves. When you talk about the Hornady BTHPs, they tend to have a very rounded ogive, which is very forgiving. It tends to self-center a whole lot better when they have a longer jump. So if you have a long throat and you have a relatively short magazine length that will require that jump, then I would stick with something like the BTHPs. When you start to get into the burger bullets, those are less jump tolerant. The hybrids tend to be better than some of the other options out there, some of the significantly more VLD oriented designs. So they will tend to really want to be closer to the lands when you start talking about those really sharp profile bullets. So stick with that stuff. Since you said the factory ammunition shot reliably, then I would start with that bullet. Now, because you have a little bit more length to work with in the magazine, you can push out those bullets a little bit further so that you have the cartridge overall length to maximize your magazine space, which will also maximize your powder capacity in the case. Just make sure, like you mentioned, you keep it short enough that it will feed reliably. Once you've figured out what that cartridge overall length is, that's where you want to start your ladder test with. So figure out the overall length that you're going to run and start your ladder test from there. Now, since you have Retumbo, I'd go ahead and start with Retumbo and make sure that not only are you shooting and you're looking for pressure signs, but you're also shooting over a chronograph. I would say that make sure you go get some of that factory Hornady ammunition, shoot it across a chronograph, get an average velocity, and set that as your baseline. Now, working up clones of factory loads is tricky because the factories have access to powders that you don't. They can order up powders in the ton variety. They can order up canister powders in huge drums that are specifically formulated for the cartridge that they want to develop or for the specific situation that they want to develop. You're restricted to whatever powder that you can buy in the reloading section. So if you like Retumbo, and I'm going to tell you, I am not a big 338 reloader. I don't have a 338 rifle here, so I'm starting to venture into territory that I haven't actually tread, just stuff that I understand from best practices for reloading. So if you want to use Retumbo, use Retumbo. Look at the reloading manuals and see what your starting charge is and what your ending charge is, and then run your ladder from there and run your ladder over the chronograph and see what that accuracy is as you approach the velocity that the factory loads were shooting at. And if you start to see pressure before then, that's going to be really curious to me because unless there's a significant burn rate difference between the Retumbo and the factory powder, you shouldn't see a pressure sign before you start to get to that velocity that the factory ammo is shooting at. And then we'll give you a little bit more of a path to go down to chase down what you like. Now, I understand that you bought a bunch of bullets in bulk. That is something that I really try to resist. Very often I'll see a really good deal on bullets, but it's not a bullet that I have used before or not a bullet that I have worked up in a gun, and you're really rolling the dice on purchasing bullets in bulk that you haven't actually shot, because some chambers like certain types of bullet designs, some chambers don't. Now, it is a Savage, so it is something that's easy to rebarrel at home. So there is the option of going ahead and purchasing a replacement barrel with a chamber that is specifically designed to shoot the cartridge that you're shooting. You can either have a Smith spin one up off of any of the myriad of premium barrels, Bartlett, Rock Creek, Hawk Hill, there's a ton of them out there, and then you can have the chamber cut specifically for those bullets that you bought and be good to go. Or you can buy an off-the-shelf Savage barrel, save yourself some time and spend it on home. But again, the chamber may not be cut specifically to the bullet that you have selected. But the advantage of buying those off-the-shelf barrels is you can buy a couple, you can throw them on the shelf, and then you can swap them out as you want. So, again, this is a tricky question without actually seeing your brass, because you mentioned that what you're seeing are ejector marks. Very often, newer rifles will have sharp ejector recesses, and at relatively low pressure levels, you'll start to get that little sliver of brass cut as the bolt rotates to eject the cartridge. So be very careful about using ejector marks. Now, if it's just a little half moon mark, usually I don't sweat that too much on either softer brass or on a newer rifle that I haven't gone through and polished those, the bolt face or polished the ejector recess. If you start to see actual flow into the ejector, so instead of having a half moon, you'll actually have almost a nipple built up on the case head where the ejector is. That is definitely a pressure sign. The pressure is actually forcing that brass back into that ejector recess in the bolt face, and that you need to be very aware of, because either you are exceeding the pressure limits or you're working with much softer brass, and it may not support the pressure that you are getting to in that cartridge. So be very wary about that, but also look at primers. When we are looking at pressure signs, we have to look at pressure signs in totality. We can't look at any individual sign because certain primers may start to flatten out or may start to crater at lower pressure levels. Some may do it at higher pressure levels. Some brass may start to flow at lower pressure levels. Some brass may hold on until much higher pressure levels. So start to look at all that stuff. Start to look at how hard the extraction is or the ejecting the cartridge. So if you really have to pound that bolt handle back, for me, that's a dead stop. If I have to smash the bolt handle back to eject a cartridge, that is beyond pressure limit, and that is a full stop at that point. I won't shoot anything beyond that, and I'll actually drop down considerably from that charge weight. So again, a lot of things to look at. Pretty long-winded question, but I think there was a lot of good information in here, and thank you for writing in a very detailed question. It's much easier to talk about these things when we have a lot of details on your situation. So thank you to Stephen. If you guys have any questions or any recommendations for Stephen, please leave them in the comments section down below. Couple of other things that we're going to talk about right now is this guy sitting in front of me. We are almost done with the review of the Magpul Pro 700 chassis system. This has been a really fun chassis to work with. It has a lot of options. That's a little bit on the heavier side of chassis systems, but some guys like heavier precision rifles. It is definitely a well-built, well-designed system with some really novel features and, of course, room to grow. So we are wrapping this guy up. We should have the review knocked out within the next week or two on it. We just have a little bit of final footage to shoot, and then we're done. But I have been very, very pleased overall with this chassis system. It really did everything that Magpul set out to do with the chassis, and I'm greatly impressed. A couple of things that we are working on right now. You will notice that the bipod that I have on here looks a little bit strange. If you notice right here, it says RRS on it. Well, this is the HC Pro adapter from Really Right Stuff. And while we have it on the Magpul chassis here, it is sitting on a Picatinny rail. But I can very quickly take this guy off. And as you see, that base is pretty wide. I can take this guy off and I can mount it on a Really Right Stuff rail, and it will clamp on really well. We have a couple of different rail options out there. I've got one from Henderson Precision that is in that will mount to the M-LOK slots on this Magpul chassis. So I can take off the Picatinny rail. I can put a full-length Really Right Stuff spec rail or ARCA spec rail on here, and then I can run this bipod wherever I want on this forend. So if you're running a barricade situation where you're going to have to thread the rifle through, but then you're going to shoot prone at the bottom of it, I can put the bipod all the way back here at the back so that I have room to thread the front end of the rifle through ports in the barricade and then still have a good solid support for shooting prone at the end. Or I can put barricade stops anywhere I want, or I can clamp it into a Really Right Stuff tripod. Just the possibilities are endless, and the Really Right Stuff or the ARCA rails are a really great option going forward. It amazes me that this wasn't something that people thought of earlier, but I honestly think for competition rifles, that is going to be the standard going forward, and we'll see the Picatinny rail go away for bipod or accessory support on forends. There are a lot of options right now. The Henderson Precision rails that we have one that will work for Keymod or M-LOK. We have another one that has hardware with it that's designed to be screwed into the bottom of a standard stock like our Macmillan A5 or Macmillan A6. So really interesting overall, gives you a ton of options. And one really cool thing about the ARCA setup that we're actually doing on a different rifle, instead of going and buying really expensive rail systems or really expensive precision rifle stuff, you can go on Amazon and you can just purchase an ARCA rail in any length that you want and just screw it to the bottom of your stock with regular hardware. So you don't have to go to any extreme measures. You can just buy a regular rail. You can screw it on the bottom of your stock. So if you're running something like NRL 22 and you're running a more budget-oriented rig, you don't have to go with the really expensive stuff. You can just get some heavy-duty screws and T-nuts and go ahead and mount a Amazon ARCA rail to the bottom of your stock, and it will work great. That is all we have for this Mail Call Mondays. If you guys have liked the episode, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions over anything we've covered, please leave it in the comments section down below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. And until next time, get out and shoot.